obviously there will be spoilers ahead. This is from the 7th book. I'll read the part where Snape dies first, and then we'll jump right into the memories. Okay. He did not know why he was doing it, why he was approaching the dying man. He did not know what he felt as he saw Snape's white face and the fingers trying to staunch the bloody wound at his neck. Harry took off the invisibility cloak and looked down upon the man he hated, whose widening black eyes found Harry as he cried to speak. Harry bent over him, and Snape seized the front of his robe and pulled him close. A terrible rasping, gurgling noise issued from Snape's throat. Take it, take it. Something more than blood was leaking from Snape. Silvery blue, neither gas nor liquid. It gushed from his mouth, and his ears and his eyes, and Harry knew what it was, but did not know what to do. A flask, conjured from thin air, was thrust into his shaking hand by Hermione. Harry lifted the silvery substance into it with his wand. When the flask was full to the brim, and Snape looked as though there was no blood left in him, his grip on Harry's robes slackened. "Look at me," he whispered. The green eyes found the black, but after a second, something in the depths of the dark pair seemed to vanish, leaving them fixed, blank, and empty. The hand holding Harry thudded to the floor, and Snape moved no more. Okay, now let's skip to the part where Harry sees the memories. This is from the chapter The Prince's Tale, by the way, if you want to look it up yourself. To escape into someone's head would be a blessed relief. Nothing that even Snape had left him could be worse than his own thoughts. The memories swirled, silver white and strange, and without hesitating, with a feeling of reckless abandonment, as though this would assuage his torturing grief, Harry dived. He fell headlong into sunlight, and his feet found warm ground. When he straightened up, he saw that he was in a nearly deserted playground. A single huge chimney dominated the distant skyline. Two girls were swinging backward and forward, and a skinny boy was watching them from behind a clump of bushes. His black hair was overlong, and his clothes were so mismatched that it looked deliberate. Two short jeans, a shabby, overlarge coat that might have belonged to a grown man, and an odd smock-like shirt. Harry moved closer to the boy. Snape looked no more than 9 or 10 years old, sallow, small, stringy. There was undisguised greed in his thin face as he watched the younger of the two girls, swinging higher and higher than her sister. "Lily, don't do it," shrieked the elder of the two. But the girl had let go of the swing at the very height of its arc and flown into the air, quite literally flown, launched herself skyward with a great shout of laughter, and instead of crumpling on the playground asphalt, she soared like a trapeze artist through the air, staying up far too long, landing far too lightly. "Mommy told you not to." Petunia stopped her swing by tracking the heels of her sandals on the ground, making a crunching, grinding sound, then leapt up, hands on hips. "Mommy said you weren't allowed, Lily." "But I'm fine," said Lily, still giggling. "Junie, look at this. Watch what I can do." Petunia glanced around. The playground was deserted, apart from themselves, and, though the girls did not know it, Snape. Lily had picked up a fallen flower from the bush behind which Snape lurked. Petunia advanced, evidently torn between curiosity and disapproval. Lily waited until Petunia was near enough to have a clear view, then held out her palm. The flower sat there, opening and closing its petals like some bizarre, many-lipped oyster. "Stop it!" "It's not hurting you," said Lily, but she closed her hand on the blossom and threw it back to the ground. "It's not right," said Petunia, but her eyes had followed the flower's flight to the ground and lingered upon it. "How do you do it?" she added, and there was definite longing in her voice. "It's obvious, isn't it?" Snape could no longer contain himself, but had jumped out from behind the bushes. Petunia shrieked and ran backward toward the swings, but Lily, though clearly startled, remained where she was. Snape seemed to regret his appearance. A dull flush of color mounted the sallow cheeks as he looked at Lily. "What's obvious?" asked Lily. Snape had an air of nervous excitement. With a glance at the distant Petunia, now hovering beside the swings, he lowered his voice and said, "I know what you are." "What do you mean?" You're a witch," whispered Snape. She looked affronted. "That's not a very nice thing to say to somebody." She turned, nose in the air, and marched off toward her sister. "No," said Snape. He was highly colored now, and Harry wondered why he did not take off the ridiculously large coat, unless it was because he did not want to reveal the smock beneath it. He flapped after the girls, looking ludicrously bat-like his older self. The sisters considered him, united in disapproval, both holding onto the one of the swing poles, as though it was the safe place in tag. "You are," said Snape to Lily. "You are a witch. I've been watching you for a while, but there's nothing wrong with that. My mom's one, and I'm a wizard." Petunia's laugh was like cold water. "Wizard!" she shrieked. Her courage returned now that she had recovered from the shock of his unexpected appearance. "I know what you are. You're that Snape boy. They live down Snipper's End by the river," she told Lily, and it was evident from her tone that she considered the address a poor recommendation. "Why have you been spying on us?" "Haven't been spying," said Snape, hot and uncomfortable, and dirty-haired in the bright sunlight. "Wouldn't spy on you anyway," he added spitefully. "You're a muggle." Though Petunia evidently did not understand the word, she could hardly mistake the tone. "Lily, come on, we're leaving," she said shrilly. Lily obeyed her sister at once, glaring at Snape as she left. He stood watching them as they marched through the playground gate, and Harry, the only one left to observe him, recognized Snape's bitter disappointment and understood that Snape had been planning this moment for a while, and that it had gone all wrong. The scene dissolved, and before Harry knew it, reformed around him. He was now in a small thicket of trees. He could see a sunlit river glittering through their trunks. The shadow cast by the trees made a basin of cool green shade. Two children sat facing each other, cross-legged on the ground. Snape had removed his coat now. His odd smock looked less peculiar in the half-light. "And the ministry can punish you if you do magic outside school. You get letters." "But I've done magic outside school." "Well, right. We haven't got wands yet. They let you off when you're a kid and you can't help it. But once you're 11, he nodded importantly, and they start training you, then you've got to go careful." There was a little silence. Lily had picked up a fallen twig and twirled it in the air, and Harry knew that she was imagining sparks trailing from it. Then she dropped the twig, leaned in toward the boy, and said, "It's real, isn't it? It's not a joke. Petunia says you're lying to me. Petunia says there isn't a Hogwarts. It is real, isn't it?" she half smiled. "You'd better be in Slytherin," said Snape, encouraged that she had brightened a little. Slytherin. One of the boys sharing the compartment, who had shown no interest at all in Lily or Snape until that point, looked around at the word, and Harry, whose attention had been focused entirely on the two beside the window, saw his father, slight, black-haired like Snape, but with that indefinable air of having been well cared for, even adored, that Snape so conspicuously lacked. "Who wants to be in Slytherin? I think I'd leave, wouldn't you?" James asked the boy lounging on the seats opposite him, and with a jolt, Harry realized that it was Sirius. Sirius did not smile. "My whole family have been in Slytherin," he said. "Blimey," said James, "and I thought you seemed all right." Sirius grinned. "Maybe I'll break the tradition." "Where are you heading, if you've got the choice?" James lifted an invisible sword. "Gryffindor, where dwelt brave at heart like my dad." Snape made a small, disparaging noise. James turned on him. "Got a problem with that?" "No," said Snape, though his slight sneer said otherwise. "If you'd rather be brawny than brainy." "Where are you hoping to go, seeing as you're neither?" interjected Sirius. James roared with laughter. Lily sat up, rather flushed, and looked from James to Sirius in dislike. "Come on, Severus, let's find another compartment." "Oh!" James and Sirius imitated her lofty voice. James tried to trip Snape as he passed. "See ya, Snivellus," a voice called as the compartment door slammed, and the scene dissolved once more. Harry was standing right behind Snape as they faced the candlelit house tables, lined with rapt faces. Then Professor McGonagall said, "Evans, Lily." He watched his mother walk forward on trembling legs and sit down upon the rickety stool. Professor McGonagall dropped the sorting hat onto her head, and barely a second after it had touched the dark red hair, the hat cried, "Gryffindor." Harry heard Snape let out a tiny groan. Lily took off the hat, handed it back to Professor McGonagall, then hurried toward the cheering Gryffindors, but as she went, she glanced back at Snape, and there was a sad little smile on her face. Harry saw Sirius move up the bench to make room for her. She took one look at him, seemed to recognize him from the train, folded her arms, and firmly turned her back on him. The roll call continued. Harry watched Lupin, Pettigrew, and his father join Lily and Sirius at the Gryffindor table. At last, when only a dozen students remained to be sorted, Professor McGonagall called Snape. Harry walked with him to the stool, watched him place the hat upon his head. "Slytherin!" cried the sorting hat, and Severus Snape moved off to the other side of the hall, away from Lily, to where the Slytherins were cheering him, to where Lucius Malfoy, a perfect badge gleaming upon his chest, patted Snape on the back as he sat down beside him. And the scene changed. Lily and Snape were walking across the castle courtyard, evidently arguing. Harry hurried to catch up with them, to listen in. As he reached them, he realized how much taller they both were. A few years seemed to have passed since their sorting. "Thought we were supposed to be friends," Snape was saying. "Best friends." "We are, Sev, but I don't like some of the people you're hanging around with. I'm sorry, but I detest Avery and Mulciber. Mulciber. What do you see in him, Sev? He's creepy. Do you know what he tried to do to Mary MacDonald the other day?" Lily had reached a pillar and leaned against it, looking up into the thin, sallow face. "That was nothing," said Snape. "It was a laugh, that's all. It was dark magic, and if you think that's funny—" "What about the stuff Potter and his mates get up to?" demanded Snape. His color rose again as he said it, unable, it seemed, to hold in his resentment. "What's Potter got to do with anything?" said Lily. "They sneak out at night. There's something weird about that Lupin. Where does he keep going?" "He's ill," said Lily. "They say he's ill. Every month at the full moon," said Snape. "I know your theory," said Lily, and she sounded understand how you can be friends with them. Harry doubted that Snape had heard her strictures on Mulciber and Avery. The moment she had insulted James Potter, his whole body had relaxed, and as they walked away, there was a new spring in Snape's step, and the scene dissolved. Harry watched again as Snape left the Great Hall after sitting his owl in defense against the dark arts, watched as he wandered away from the castle and strayed inadvertently close to the place beneath the beech tree where James, Sirius, Lupin, and Pettigrew sat together. But Harry kept his distance this time, because he knew what happened after James had hoisted Severus into the air and taunted him. He knew what had been done and said, and it gave him no pleasure to hear it again. He watched as Lily joined the group and went to Snape's defense. Distantly, he heard Snape shout at her in his humiliation and his fury, the unforgivable word, mudblood. The scene changed. I'm sorry. I'm not interested. I'm sorry. Save your breath. It was nighttime. Lily, who was wearing a dressing gown, stood with her arms folded in front of the portrait of the fat lady at the entrance to Gryffindor Tower. I only came out because Mary told me you were threatening to sleep here. I would have done. I never meant to call you mudblood. It just slipped out. There was no pity in Lily's voice. It's too late. I've made excuses for you for years. None of my friends can understand why I even talk to you. You and your precious little Death Eater friends. You see, you don't even deny it. You don't even deny that's what you're all aiming to be. You can't wait to join you-know-who, can you? He opened his mouth, but closed it without speaking. I can't pretend anymore. You've chosen your way. I've chosen mine. No, listen, I didn't mean to call me mudblood, but you call everyone of my birth mudblood, Severus. Why should I be any different? He struggled on the verge of speech, but with a contemptuous look, she turned and climbed back through the portrait hole. The corridor dissolved, and the scene took a little longer to reform. Harry seemed to fly through shifting shapes and colors, until his surroundings solidified again, and he stood on a hilltop, forlorn and cold in the darkness, the wind whistling through the branches of a few leafless trees. The adult Snape was panting, turning on the spot, his wand gripped tightly in his hand, waiting for something or for someone. His fear infected Harry too, even though he knew that he could not be harmed, and he looked over his shoulder, wondering what it was that Snape was waiting for. Then a blinding, jagged jet of white light flew through the air. Harry thought of lightning, but Snape had dropped to his knees, and his wand had flown out of his hand. Don't kill me. That was not my intention. Any sound of Dumbledore apparating had been drowned by At last he said, "Very well, very well, but never, never tell Dumbledore. This must be between us, swear it. I cannot bear, especially Potter's son. I want your word." "My word, Severus, that I shall never reveal the best of you," Dumbledore sighed, looking down into Snape's ferocious, anguished face. "If you insist." The office dissolved, but reformed instantly. Snape was pacing up and down in front of Dumbledore. Mediocre, arrogant as his father, a determined rule breaker, delighted to find himself famous, attention-seeking, and impertinent. "You see what you expect to see, Severus," said Dumbledore, without raising his eyes from a copy of Transfiguration today. "Other teachers report that the boy is modest, likable, and reasonably talented. Personally, I find him an engaging child." Dumbledore turned a page and said, without looking up, "Keep an eye on Quirrell, won't you?" A whirl of color, and now everything darkened, and Snape and Dumbledore stood a little apart in the entrance hall, while the last stragglers from the Yule Ball passed them on their way to bed. "Well," murmured Dumbledore, "Karkaroff's mark is becoming darker too. He's panicking. He fears retribution. You know how much help he gave the Ministry after the Dark Lord fell." Snape looked sideways at Dumbledore's crooked-nosed profile. "Karkaroff intends to flee if the mark burns." "Does he?" said Dumbledore softly, as Fleur Delacour and Roger Davies came giggling in from the grounds. "And are you tempted to join him?" "No," said Snape, his black eyes on Fleur's and Roger's retreating figures. "I am not such a coward." "No," agreed Dumbledore, "you're a braver man by far than Igor Karkaroff. You know, I sometimes think we soared too soon." He walked away, leaving Snape looking stricken. And now Harry stood in the headmaster's office yet again. It was night time, and Dumbledore sagged sideways in the throne-like chair behind the desk, apparently semi-conscious. His right hand dangled over the side, blackened and burned. Snape was muttering incantations, pointing his wand at the wrist of the hand, while with his left hand he dipped a goblet full of thick golden potion down Dumbledore's throat. After a moment or two, Dumbledore's eyelids fluttered and opened. "Why," said Snape, without preamble, "why did you put that on that ring? It carries a curse. Surely you realize that. Why even touch it?" Marvolocon's ring lay on the desk before Dumbledore. It was cracked. The sword of Gryffindor lay beside it. Dumbledore grimaced. "I was a fool, sorely tempted." "Tempted by what?" Dumbledore did not answer. "It is a miracle you managed to return here." Snape sounded furious. "That ring carried a curse of extraordinary power. To contain it is all we can hope for. I have trapped the curse in one hand for the time being." Dumbledore raised his blackened, useless hand and examined it with the expression of one being shown an interesting curio. "You have done very well, Severus. How long do you think I have?" Dumbledore's tone was conversational. He might have been asking for a weather forecast. Snape hesitated and then said, "I cannot tell. Maybe a year. There is no halting such a spell forever. It will spread eventually. It is the sort of curse that strengthens over time." Dumbledore smiled. The news that he had less than a year to live seemed a matter of little or no concern to him. "I'm fortunate, extremely fortunate, that I have you, Severus. If you had only summoned me a little earlier, I might have been able to do more, buy you more time," said Snape furiously. He looked down at the broken ring and the sword. "Did you think that breaking the ring would break the curse?" "Something like that. I was delirious, no doubt," said Dumbledore. With an effort he straightened himself in his chair. "Well, really, this makes matters much more straightforward." Snape looked utterly perplexed. Dumbledore smiled. "I refer to the plan Lord Voldemort is revolving around me. His plans to have the poor Malfoy boy murder me. pushes his position. All the same, try, I'm concerned less for myself than for accidental victims of whatever schemes might occur to the boy. Ultimately, of course, there's one thing to be done if we are to save him from Lord Voldemort's wrath. Snape raised his eyebrows, and his tone was sardonic as he asked, "Are you intending to let him kill you?" "Certainly not. You must kill me." There was a long silence, broken only by an odd clicking noise. Fawkes the Phoenix was gnawing a bit of cuttlebone. "Would you like me to do it now?" asked Snape, his voice heavy with irony. "Or would you like a few moments to compose an epitaph?" "Oh, not quite yet," said Dumbledore, smiling. "I dare say the moment will present itself in due course. Given what has happened tonight," he indicated his withered hand, "we can be sure that it will happen within a year." "If you don't mind dying," said Snape roughly, "why not let Draco do it?" "That boy's soul is not yet so damaged," said Dumbledore. "I would not have it ripped apart on my account." "And my soul, Dumbledore, mine." "You alone know whether it will harm your soul to help an old man avoid pain and humiliation," said Dumbledore. "I ask this one great favor of you, Severus, because death is coming for me as surely as the Chudley Cannons will finish bottom of this year's league. I confess I should prefer a quick, painless exit to the protracted and messy affair it will be. For instance, Greyback is involved. I hear Voldemort has recruited him, or dear Bellatrix, who likes to play with her food before she eats it." His tone was light, but his blue eyes pierced Snape as they had frequently pierced Harry, as though the soul they discussed was visible to him. At last Snape gave another curt nod. Dumbledore seemed satisfied. "Thank you, Severus." The office disappeared, and now Snape and Dumbledore were strolling together in the deserted castle grounds by twilight. "What are you doing with Potter all these evenings you are closeted together?" Snape asked abruptly. Dumbledore looked wary. "Why, you aren't trying to give him more detention, Severus." "The boy will soon have spent more time in detention than out." "He is his father over again. In looks, perhaps, but his deepest nature is much more like his mother's. I spend time with Harry because I have things to discuss with him, information I must give him before it is too late." "Information," repeated Snape. "You trust him. You do not trust me." "It is not a question of trust. I have, as we both know, limited time. It is essential that I give the boy enough information for him to do what he needs to do." "And why may I not have the same information?" "I prefer not to put all of my secrets in one basket, particularly not a basket that spends so much time dangling on the arm of Lord Voldemort." "Which I do on your orders, and you do it extremely well. Do not think that I underestimate the constant danger in which you place yourself, Severus. To give Voldemort what appears to be valuable information while withholding the essentials is a job I would entrust to nobody but you. Yet you can find much more in a boy who is incapable of occlumency, whose magic is mediocre, and who has a direct connection into the Dark Lord's mind." "Voldemort fears that connection," said Dumbledore. "Not so long ago he had one small taste of what truly sharing Harry's mind means to him. It was pain such as he had never experienced. He will not try to possess Harry again, I am sure of it. Not in that way." "I don't understand." "Lord Voldemort's soul, maimed as it is, cannot bear close contact with a soul like Harry's, like a tongue on frozen steel, like flash in flame. Souls, we're talking of minds. In the case of Harry and Lord Voldemort, to speak of one is to speak of the other." Dumbledore glanced around to make sure that they were alone. They were close by the Forbidden Forest now, but there was no sign of anyone near them. you agreed to keep a close eye on our young slithering friend. Snape looked angry, mutinous. Dumbledore sighed. Come to my office tonight, Severus, at 11, and you shall not complain that I have no confidence in you. They were back in Dumbledore's office, the windows dark, and Fawkes sat silent, as Snape sat quite still, as Dumbledore walked around him talking. Harry must not know, not until the last moment, not until it is necessary, otherwise how could he have the strength to do what must be done? But what must he do? That is between Harry and me. Now listen closely, Severus. There will come a time, after my death, do not argue, do not interrupt, there will come a time when Lord Voldemort will seem to fear for the life of his snake. For Nagini, Snape looked astonished. Precisely. If there comes a time when Lord Voldemort stops sending that snake forth to do his bidding, but keeps it safe beside him under magical protection, then I think it will be safe to tell Harry. Tell him what? Dumbledore took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Tell him that on the night Lord Voldemort tried to kill him, when Lily cast her own life between them as a shield, the killing curse rebounded upon Lord Voldemort, and a fragment of Voldemort's soul was blasted apart from the whole, and latched itself onto the only living soul left in that collapsed building. Part of Lord Voldemort lives inside Harry, and it is that which gives him the power of speech with snakes, and a connection with Lord Voldemort's mind that he has never understood. And while the fragment of soul, unmissed by Voldemort, remains attached to and protected by Harry, Lord Voldemort cannot die. Harry seemed to be watching the two men from one end of a long tunnel. They were so far away from him, their voice echoing strangely in his ears. So the boy must die, asked Snape quite calmly. And Voldemort himself must do it, Severus. That is essential. Another long silence. Then Snape said, I thought, all those years, that we were protecting him for her, for Lily. We have protected him because it has been essential to teach him, to raise him, to let him try his strength, said Dumbledore, his eyes still tight shut. Meanwhile, the connection between them grows ever stronger, a parasitic growth. Sometimes I've thought he suspects it himself. If I know him, he will have arranged matters so that when he does set out to meet his death, it will truly mean the end of Voldemort. Dumbledore opened his eyes. Snape looked horrified. You have kept him alive so that he can die at the right moment. Don't be shocked, Severus. How many men and women have you watched die? Lately, only those whom I could not save, said Snape. He stood up. You have used me. Meaning, I have spied for you and lied for you, put myself in mortal danger for you. Everything was supposed to be to keep Lily Potter's son safe. Now you tell me you have been raising him like a pig for slaughter. But this is touching, Severus, said Dumbledore seriously. Have you have grown to care for the boy, after all? For him, shouted Snape. Expecto Patronum. From the tip of his wand burst a silver doe. She landed on the office floor, bounded once across the office, and soared out of the window. Dumbledore watched her fly away, and as her silvery glow faded, he turned back to Snape. his mind and see you acting for him. I know, said Snape curtly. He approached the portrait of Dumbledore and pulled at its side. It swung forward, revealing a hidden cavity behind it, from which he took the sword of Gryffindor. And you still aren't going to tell me why it's so important to give Potter the sword, said Snape, as he swung a traveling cloak over his robes. No, I don't think so, said Dumbledore's portrait. He will know what to do with it. And Severus, be very careful. They may not take kindly to your appearance after George Weasley's mishap. Snape turned at the door. Don't worry, Dumbledore, he said coolly. I have a plan. And Snape left the room. Harry rose up out of the pensieve, and moments later he lay on the carpeted floor in exactly the same room. Snape might just have closed the door. Okay, that was it. That was quite a long chapter. Goodness, I think it's one of my favorite chapters of the entire series. It truly makes you